Hello and welcome to my channel Polyglot Reading. My name is David, and usually on my channel I talk about classics or more contemporary literature, books that are worth reading, and I usually pick my books from the German, English, Italian, French or Yiddish literature. Today I'm continuing with my little series of videos about comics and graphic novels, and I would like to share with you my excitement about a recent publication by Michael Farr related to the Tintin series by the Belgian author and drawer Hergé. I don't think there's a need to introduce or explain that the Tintin series. I think they surely can be considered real classics of the genre that are well known to everybody who is interested in comics of the 20th century. These stories of the handsome reporter Tintin, who travels a lot abroad to foreign exotic countries and who is always accompanied by his little white dog, and most times also by other famous or notorious characters like the drunkard Captain Haddock or the almost deaf Professor Calculus. This restless reporter Tintin, who is usually not just a reporter, but he is involved in crime investigations, in political plots or society scandals. It is one of the comic series that I grew up with and that I deeply fell in love with. Back then, of course, in the German translation, where Tintin is named Tim and Professor Calculus is Professor Balduin Beanline. But I think it's about time to take a look at the French original soon, now as I'm more proficient and more fluent in French. Anyway, that's not the topic of today's video. What I would like to present to you is this publication by Michael Farr, published this year in 2024 by Edition Moulin-Zar. I hope I'm not terribly mispronouncing the French name of the publisher. This is an alphabetic anthology of curiosities from Hergé's Adventures of Tintin, or the short title is Tintin A-Z. I've just bought this book 2 days ago, and I had an almost compulsive reading fit that cost me quite a few hours of my usual sleeping time, just to read through it as quick as possible. And I'd like to share my excitement about this book with you, and highly recommend it to any fan of the Tintin series, because it's not just a collection of interesting facts, it's also a great invitation and an instruction how to take a closer look at the stories and its graphics oneself, and to go down some rabbit holes in order to explore new things about these stories and the people, the plot, the objects, and also the societal and political events of the time that these stories were written and are referring to, just to enjoy these stories in a deeper way. So this book will give you much more than just its content, just a sort of random collection of essays or encyclopedia articles about a very objective selection of specific people and topics and objects. It really can change the way you look at these comics, and so it can help you to have a much richer reading experience than before. Just a few words about the author, Michael Farr himself. Michael Farr is a well-known British expert on the Tintin comic series. He's also very familiar with the very background and character of Tim's work as a reporter, because Michael Farr himself, he had been an international reporter himself. He had been working for Reuters and the Daily Telegraph, and he had traveled the world as a foreign correspondent before he fell in love with the Tintin series and started writing books about the series. He also has some first-hand knowledge about the author and his environment. He had personally met Hergé, and he had many conversations with some of Hergé's long-term friends and collaborators, including Hergé's widow. In short, what does this book give to the reader? It starts with an introduction to Hergé's life and the story, how the whole series about Tintin got started. And I think this section has just the right length. It's just a few pages, but with all the essential details. So we learn that the Tintin series is actually a random result of Hergé's failed dream to work as an international reporter himself. That this had been the dream of his youth, but he only managed to get a job in the subscription department in the basement of a Brussels newspaper. And it was just by accident that one day the editor's secretary, when she came down to the basement to look for an address, she spotted Hergé's drawing talent, and because he was using some of his free time, his boring time, to make some drawings, more or less on waste paper. And sometime later, when the newspaper planned to launch a children's supplement of the newspaper, he recommended Hergé for the job as first as contributor and then editor of the supplement. And so Hergé got this promotion to become editor of the children's supplement of this newspaper. And again, it was sort of an accident, a random event, because he just couldn't find enough suitable material from external contributors. So he started to bolster this children's supplement with regular contributions of his own. A strip cartoon that featured his dream, the adventures of a young reporter. So this was just driven by the need to have more material and driven by his own failed dreams. So out of this context, out of these motives, he created the first stories of Tintin. And how Michael Farr puts it, the rest is history in every sense. It's history on the one hand because the Tintin stories became a great success for decades, but on the other hand also because the stories are all actually set in political, societal, or technological events that actually took place or that were very present in the news world, that were part of the public opinion or the public discussion or plans that were communicated to the public, like the travel to the moon, which was depicted in Tintin novels, I think almost 15 or 16 years before it actually took place. So sometimes Hergé uses these real stories in a slight disguise, or sometimes he uses them rather openly, at sometimes even provoking diplomatic conflicts. I think this is unusual for a comic series. So, for example, when in The Blue Lotus, he wrote about the Japanese-Chinese conflict, in particular the Japanese agitation and repression in the Manchuria region, and about a staged blowing up of a railway by saboteurs. And we learn that this created in the book by Michael Farr, that this created real diplomatic tensions, and even a note from the Japanese government to the US embassy and so on. And we also learned that Michael Farr was a really restless investigator and researcher on the topics he was going to write about. So he was building up a great archive of facts, of literature, of snippets from other newspaper and media, on topics that he was going to write about, or that he was thinking that he might be writing about it one day in the future. So he was building up a great archive of facts for future use. And so by doing so, he developed, just as a good reporter should do, also a very good and realistic sense of the long-term effects that certain political movements can have, and some of them he already anticipated in his stories. For example, already in the first adventure of Tintin traveling the Soviet Union in 1929, he anticipated the devastating effect that the Bolsheviks' policy about seizing the grain and the policy about the farmers would have on the farmers themselves, on their alienation from the government, and on all these events that culminated in the Great Famine of 1932 that killed literally millions of people. Part of that is already anticipated in his 1929 story about him traveling the Soviet Union. Okay, that was a long preamble, just about the preface and the short bio of Hergé that is given in this book. Let's talk a little bit about the actual core part of the book. The core part is an alphabetic collection of essays or encyclopedia articles, all nicely illustrated, about topics, people, or objects that are prominent, that are notorious in the Tintin stories. And they provide some interesting background information, either in relation to the sources of inspiration that Hergé tapped from, or cross-references within the series that may not be obvious to the average reader, or references to other literary works. And as I mentioned, some of this is just entertaining. It's just fun facts that the fans of Tintin will appreciate. Others are really interesting historic or cultural facts that help the reader to get a better understanding on how these stories are framed within a broader societal and cultural context. And some of them are also invitations how to take a closer look at some topics and some of the narrative tricks of Hergé, just to make your own discoveries in a subsequent closer reading of the stories of these comics. Let me give you a few examples. More of the fun fact type is the information on the name of the indigenous natives that play a role in the series The Broken Ear and Tim and the Picaros. We learned that the name of the tribe, the Arumbayas, that this is actually taken from one of Hergé's favorite deserts, desserts, not a desert, a dessert, a sweet, the Baba Urum. That is a small, I quote from Farr, a small round piece of sponge cake liberally soaked in rum and topped with some chantilly cream. Or that the Arumbaya language is not at all an invented one, but Hergé used an obscure and almost extinct Brussels dialect called Marolien, that he had picked up from his grandmother, and while appearing gibberish to most readers, it gave a lot of fun, of course, to those readers who could understand it, this dialect. And this worked so well that in later books, in King Ottokar's Scepter and in the Calculus Affair, Hergé used this dialect again. He just adapted it by just adding sort of a Slavonic touch to make it, to give it more credibility as a Slavonic language. And an interesting story is also behind all these colorful insults that Captain Haddock is using. If you take a close at these words, their stunning effect of all these insults is mostly due to the fact that most of these words are not actually insults or swear words or four-letter words, but they are regular but slightly unusual words. So they are completely taken out of context. So words that you would just not expect to be used in that situation or as an insult. So part of their powerful impact is just caused by their unexpectedness, by their being so much out of context. And this idea came to Hergé when he was witnessing a strong argument between a Brussels greengrocer and a customer, because the greengrocer used that sort of insults to insult the customer, and so all these bushy bazooks, blistering barnacles, and ectoplasms and Colorado beetles that are used by Captain Haddock, starting with the 1940s story, The Crab with the Golden Claws. We owe all this to an unknown Brussels greengrocer of the late 1930s. The attentive reader might also have noticed in the Tintin books that dreams are sort of a recurring theme, almost a leitmotif in the Tintin stories. And like in The Blue Lotus, in Tintin in Tibet, in The Cigars of the Pharaoh, etc. And Hergé himself, this is triggered by the fact that Hergé himself was not only a compulsive dreamer, but also he gave a lot of attention to his own dreams. He was actually keeping a notebook at his bedside, and if he woke up in the night, he turned on the light and he was taking comprehensive notes of his dreams, and even tried to analyze his dreams. So either with the help of books written by psychologists that published on that matter, like Carl Gustav Jung, or by actually having a consultation with a psychology professor in Switzerland named Ricklin, who was a pupil of Carl Gustav Jung. So I think it's worth to take a closer look also at the Tintin series and the dreams that are used in as a narrative means, also to take a look at them from the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung's analytical psychology, or maybe even from Freudian psychoanalysis. Okay, I'm not going to provide more details about the topics, more examples, in order not to spoil your own enjoyment of reading this book. Let's be clear, this anthology is far from being comprehensive. I think this is actually stated by Michael Farr himself, that this has never been his intention. I just quote from the preface. The object of this Tintin A to Z is to select details and facts that may be less familiar or even unknown, and which throw a new perspective on this remarkable reporter and his adventures. It is inevitably a highly subjective, arbitrary, and personal view. On a whim, I have chosen one, sometimes two, and twice three aspects to fit every letter of the alphabet. It does not, therefore, pretend to be at all comprehensive, but I hope it may be instructive and, most importantly, entertaining. If it encourages readers to return to particular adventures for another read and further enjoyment, then I have succeeded. Okay, for me, this approach has worked very well. So this anthology, I find it equally entertaining and also instructive in publication, and really a very nice invitation to reread the Tintin Comics series. Just to give you an idea of the topics treated in the anthology, here is just a selection of some of the topics treated in the anthology. I'm not listing all of them here, not to create any problems with the intellectual property rights of the publisher or the author. Okay, that's all for today. I hope you have enjoyed this video and you're going to grab your Tintin volumes and to give them a read. If you enjoyed this video, you might consider giving me a thumbs up or subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching, take care, and bye.